Hello, citizens of the multiverse, and welcome to DarkKnightNation for some really quick, non-spoiler thoughts on Spider-Man Far From Home. So I saw it opening night, and then obviously 4th of July happened and all that. But I did want to give you guys some really brief thoughts on the film. And again, this is spoiler-free. I want to make sure people go out, get a chance to see this movie. It was a blast. I had a really great time watching this movie, and it is a great successor to Spider-Man Homecoming. In my opinion, I really feel like this movie found its strengths in a lot of qualities that Homecoming actually faltered on, and maybe had some of its disadvantages or shortcomings where Homecoming was strong, which I found super ironic because we have the same director. Nonetheless, an excellent, worthy successor in this Spider-Man franchise. And again, you know, everything's been going around about this movie kind of being the bookend to Marvel Cinematic Phase 3, and that it was. It did an excellent job at following up on where we left off with Endgame, learning about the consequences from the snap in Infinity War, so on and so forth. What is that doing to not only Peter and his group of friends, but the world? And they just do an excellent job picking up on that from the get-go. So that is one of the biggest strengths of this movie for me, is that we are able to really continue that long interweaving narrative into this film. One really unique part about this movie for me is that it felt like a comic book through and through. And I know like Spider-Verse was like a comic book on the screen, but I think for live action, this might be Marvel's closest film, just in terms of the tonality, the style of the storytelling, even at times like the dialogue and the comedy and the way that worked, the pacing. It just felt like a comic book, and it really worked to the advantage of Marvel for this film, because sometimes making that adaptive cross doesn't work super well, but I thought that it was really great in this film. A lot of really crazy high-flying action. I think the fight choreography and the battle scenes were so Spider-Man. We finally see a Spider-Man take advantage of his ability to be nimble and acrobatic and use his webbing in really creative ways. It felt like a comic book, you know. It felt like there were a bunch of splash pages, you know, every couple of minutes on the screen, and I really enjoyed that. Speaking of the comics, one of the things that I think is so central to Spider-Man is that out of pretty much every masked superhero out there, Marvel, DC, whatever other publisher you want to name, Peter Parker struggles the most with the dual identity of being Spider-Man and Peter Parker. Because unlike the Batmans or the Supermans, he doesn't want to just be one side. He values both sides of his identity the most, and especially with these stories taking place in high school, Peter is really trying to guard that identity. And we spend a lot of time focusing on that, and really the consequences of living that dual life is really apparent throughout this film. That was something that I deeply appreciated going into this film. Not to mention, the interactions between the characters were phenomenal. Hats off to the cast, man. You know, Tom Holland, Jon Favreau, Zendaya, Jacob Batalon. Even, like, remember the quirky teacher from Homecoming? He was also excellent in this film. Jake Gyllenhaal as Mysterio, phenomenal. Man, the casting in Marvel movies is like some of the best I've seen in literally my history of watching film. There is such a chemistry between everybody on scene, and I absolutely love that. Not to mention, just writing-wise, the interactions between them just felt so real and so relatable. Again, this all takes place with Peter being in high school, and if you've seen the trailers, you also know that they are really pushing the MJ-Peter relationship in this film. Based off of Homecoming, we also know that, like, this MJ isn't necessarily Mary Jane Watson. She's a very different character, but I love her relationship with Peter in this film, and I love the way that they play off of each other, both writing-wise and just the way that Zendaya and Tom Holland put themselves together on screen. Their relationship is just so beautifully awkward. You know, it is how teenagers would act. And again, like, the time of making this video, I'm only 22, so I wasn't a teenager very long ago, and I remember what that's like. And the movie just felt so relatable, and there were so many times where I was just so invested in the relationship of these kids with one another. I didn't care about the action. I was like, bring me back to MJ and Peter. I want to see more of this. And that was consistent throughout the film. You know, I mean, particularly I loved the MJ-Peter dynamic, and obviously Ned as well. But just the chemistry that everybody had on screen was phenomenal. It was all very believable. Just such a level of charming quirks. Now, one thing that I have at times had problems with Marvel is how formulaic their comedy gets. But this one really hit hard. It came out of the gate swinging with the comedy. I was laughing my ass off throughout the entire film. And everybody else in the audience that was watching opening night was too. It was so freaking funny. This movie was just so filled with a plethora of different tones, from like the drama, there's tragedy, there is obviously the comedy, so on and so forth, man. Just tonally also, they knocked this movie out of the park. Now, let's get a little bit into the writing. And I really don't want to go too far into depth because, again, I don't want to give you guys any spoilers. But let's look at like the central themes of this movie. And they really drove those home between that collaborative process between the writers and the cast. It was just so moving, you know? Like, it does pick up on the central theme from Spider-Man Homecoming. And if you don't know what that is, I would definitely interpret it as believing in yourself, having confidence in yourself, and being able to live your own life, and also being able to discern the good people in your life from the bad people in your life. And this movie, I think, did that better than Spider-Man Homecoming. I think it elaborated on those themes, and it pushed them even further, and I felt them a lot more in this film. You know, for me, Homecoming was a good movie. I enjoyed it. But it was a little bit more superficial in terms of theme, and unlike that movie, I really felt it. I was in it for the long haul with these characters, and the good, the bad, the ugly, and all the in-between. And also, thematically, we play a lot with Spider-Man's identity, both the duality of Peter Parker, but also trying to live up to the mantle of Tony Stark, Iron Man. And that is a big component in Peter Parker's internal struggle with believing in himself and believing in his ability to live up to what Tony Stark stood for. So, one of the things that's been on everybody's mind are the end credit scenes. I mean, it should be self-explanatory that you guys should be staying for the end credit scenes in Marvel films by now. But I personally think that the two end credit scenes we got for this movie are two of the best we have ever gotten in the 23 Marvel Cinematic Universe films. They are nuts. Man, it's so hard not to spoil anything talking about this, but they're ridiculous, and they have major implications moving forward, I think, simultaneously for the entire overarching universe and for Peter. So if you guys haven't already, make sure you go watch this movie. It is such a joy. I'm personally going to go see it probably again next week because I enjoyed it so much. And I think, honestly, I liked it more than Homecoming in the end. And I really dug Homecoming. Like, this movie, and don't quote me on it because I haven't really thought this through, might be in my top 10 favorite Marvel Cinematic Universe films. It was a blast. It wasn't without its problems. It certainly was not without its problems, and I don't want to give you too many of my problems because I don't want them to impact your viewing of the movie. I will say, I guess the most disappointing thing in this was, in the previous Spider-Man film, I thought Michael Keaton as Vulture and just the way that character was written and the way he was played was phenomenal. I think Vulture is like easily top 5 best Marvel Cinematic Universe villains that we've seen so far. Mysterio, there are some aspects of him that were really good, and I think that was probably just Jake Gyllenhaal being the superstar talent that he is. But there are some aspects to Mysterio in this film that I was kind of like, oh, okay, it's a bit lame. But very serviceable. Not bad. No part of this movie was bad. So, if you haven't, make sure you go check out this movie. And if you have seen this movie, do me a favor, let me know down in the comments below, what are you thinking about it? What did you walk out of that movie feeling like? How are you feeling now? You know, whatever amount of time it has been since you've seen it. But if you haven't seen the movie, what are you expecting? Are you planning on going to see it? Whatever it is, let me know down in the comments below because I'm really curious to see what you guys are thinking about this one. Now, with all that out of the way, I just want to thank you guys from deep down in my itty bitty nerdy heart so much for watching this video and showing support to the channel. If you enjoyed, please make sure to leave a like, comment down below answering the question of the day, and subscribe to the channel for more content. We like to do comic book reviews, story analysis, character discussions, and really just break down the things we love about comics, including some of the most amazing adaptations.